Characters to profile. Robert, father, businessman, main character. Mary, housekeeper, central to the discovery. Luke, son, 6 years old, child. Here is the Jason ready for prompt injection. Note: the script provides few direct physical descriptions. Where detail was lacking, I kept unspecified to avoid inventing attributes unsupported by the text. Video title: You're Not Like the Others. Characters. Name: Robert. Visual descriptor: male, 38 years old, American, unspecified skin tone, no distinctive facial features described, hair not described, body build unspecified, wearing business attire, suit, meeting clothes. Name: Mary. Visual descriptor: female, unspecified years old, American, unspecified skin tone, no distinctive facial features described, hair not described, body build unspecified, wearing maid housekeeper practical clothes, discreet, utilitarian. Name: Luke. Visual descriptor: male, 6 years old, American, unspecified skin tone, no distinctive facial features described, child, hair not described, small child's build, wearing casual children's clothes. He came home at 3 in the afternoon, planning to finish reports. The house was silent when he opened the door, but not empty. Low voices coming from Luke's room, focused. He approached without making a sound. Mary was talking to his son, but her voice was different. It had a cadence, a gentle authority he'd never noticed before. She was teaching Luke about astronomy. Complex concepts transformed into something that made the boy's eyes shine. The stars you see in the sky, Luke, some of them no longer exist, but their light has traveled so long through the universe that we can still see them. It's like luminous memories of the cosmos. Robert froze. Luminous memories of the cosmos? Since when do housekeepers sound like philosophers? He stayed there, hidden. Mary continued for 10 minutes, answering Luke's endless questions with patience and depth that unsettled him. When she got up to prepare a snack, he quickly went back to the living room, pretending he'd just arrived. "Hi, Mr. Robert." Mary greeted him with her usual voice, that simple and polite voice. "You're back early today?" "Yes, meeting was cancelled," he replied, observing her more carefully now. "What were you two doing?" "Oh, just playing." Luke asked about the stars, so I told him some stories. Stories. She called it stories. But Robert knew they weren't just stories. That explanation about stellar light and cosmic time wasn't something you learn watching television. In the following weeks, Robert began to pay attention. Real attention. And the more he observed, the more strange details he noticed. First, the watch. Mary always wore a simple uniform, without adornments. But one morning, when she bent down to pick up one of Luke's toys, her sleeve rode up. There, discreet on her wrist, shone a Patek Philippe. Robert froze. He had considered buying that exact model the year before, worth nearly $40,000 USD. He'd given up because it seemed like unnecessary ostentation. And now there was the same watch on his housekeeper's wrist. Impossible. He blinked, looked again. The logo was unmistakable. The dial surface reflected light in a way that replicas never managed to imitate. That was genuine. A few days later, he heard Mary talking on the phone in the garden. Her voice had a different fluidity, a musicality he'd never noticed before. She was speaking in French, not the hesitant French of someone who took a basic course, but the French of someone who lived in France. When she noticed Robert was nearby, she quickly switched to English and hung up. "Sorry for using the phone, Mr. Robert." She looked away. "Oh, just a little. I learned it a long time ago." A lie. He had just heard at least 3 minutes of fluent conversation, with vocabulary that went beyond bonjour and merci. Who was this woman? A person with that level of education, with $40,000 on her wrist, working for just $250 per week? It didn't make sense. But it was Luke who provided the most revealing clues. "Dad, today Aunt Mary explained to me why Beethoven is different from Mozart," the boy said one evening during dinner, excited. "She said Mozart is like a perfect garden where every flower is in the right place. But Beethoven is a storm. Everything is powerful and wild and makes you feel big things." Robert dropped his fork. A housekeeper was teaching his son music theory using sophisticated metaphors. "How does she know all this, Dad?" Robert had no answer. And the more he thought about it, the more that absence of an answer bothered him. He tried to rationalize. Maybe she was an exceptional autodidact. Maybe the watch was a family heirloom. But the convenient explanations began to crumble when he paid attention to her posture. When Mary thought no one was watching, something changed. Her shoulders opened. Her chin lifted. There was a natural, almost aristocratic elegance that emerged for moments before she noticed and corrected it, returning to the role of the humble housekeeper. It was theater. Robert realized this on a Thursday afternoon. Mary was arranging books on the shelf when a philosophy volume fell. She picked it up, ran her fingers over the cover with intimate familiarity, and for 3 seconds, just 3, her face transformed. There was nostalgia there, recognition, like someone reuniting with an old friend. Then she noticed Robert at the door. The mask returned instantly. "Sorry, Mr. Robert, I'll be more careful." That wasn't ignorance. It was disguise. The turning point happened on a Thursday. Luke was having a monumental tantrum ice cream before dinner was non-negotiable, according to Robert. The boy was crying, screaming, throwing himself on the floor. Robert oscillated between firmness and frustration, completely lost. Mary entered the room. Without saying anything, she knelt down at Luke's eye level. She looked into his eyes with a calm, almost hypnotic intensity. She said something in a low voice. Robert couldn't hear the words. 30 seconds later, Luke stopped crying. He took a deep breath, nodded, got up, apologized to his father in a calm voice, and went to wash his face. Robert was paralyzed. That wasn't normal. He had spent 20 minutes trying to calm his son down. Mary did it in half a minute. "What did you say to him?" She smiled, and in that smile, Robert saw something that shouldn't be there. Authority, deep confidence. The smile of someone accustomed to commanding, to understanding human psychology at levels that go beyond maternal instinct. "I just explained that emotions are like waves, Mr. Robert. They come, they get strong, but they always pass. And that he is bigger than his emotions." Blank line. Robert felt a chill down his spine. Blank line. That wasn't homespun wisdom. It was the language of advanced therapy, executive coaching, someone trained in emotional intelligence at institutional levels. Blank line. That night, after Mary left, Robert sat alone in the living room. Blank line. The questions wouldn't leave him in peace. Blank line. Who is she? Why is someone with that education working cleaning houses? What past is she hiding? Blank line. And then, the question that froze his blood. Does this have anything to do with Luke? Blank line. Mary's dedication to the boy wasn't just professional. There was something too maternal, too careful, too personal. As if she wasn't just taking care of a child, but protecting something precious that belonged to her. Blank line. Robert opened his laptop. Blank line. If Mary had secrets, he was going to uncover them. Discreetly, without fanfare. He just needed the truth. Blank line. What he was about to uncover would extend far beyond the profile of a housekeeper with unexpected depth. What would emerge next would fundamentally redefine not just Mary's identity, but his own, and most terrifyingly, it would reshape Luke's entire narrative. Blank line. Because some secrets aren't hidden in vaults or mansions. Some secrets hide in simple uniforms, in discreet smiles, in stories about stars told to curious boys. Blank line. And the most expensive secrets of all? Those hide in plain sight, patiently waiting for the right moment to be revealed. Blank line. Robert needed answers. He typed Mary Sullivan, New York into Google. Blank line. 300,000 results. None useful. Generic profiles. Women with the same name but utterly disparate lives. He refined the search, adding keywords like housekeeper and French, then attempted a reverse image search with the surreptitious photo he'd captured of her the previous week. Blank line. Nothing matched. Blank line. There were Mary Sullivan profiles on social media, but the photos showed different women. Professional histories with gigantic gaps. 3-4 years without records, as if the person had simply ceased to exist for entire periods. And then he found something strange. A newspaper article from 7 years ago mentioned a Mary Sullivan involved in an irregular adoption process in New York. The case was archived. No details, just that vague mention, buried in the middle of text about reforms in the adoption system. Robert felt his stomach tighten. In the following days, he began to notice things he had previously ignored. The way Mary held her coffee cup, delicate, elegant, nothing consistent with hands accustomed to manual labor. The words she chose when speaking to Luke, always precise, always refined. He tried casual questions. "Mary, have you always worked in cleaning?" She smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "I've done a bit of everything in life, sir." Vague, evasive. Days later, he tried another approach. "Do you have family here in the city?" Pause. Too long. "No, sir, just myself." A lie. He sensed it in the hesitation, in the averted gaze, in the way she quickly changed the subject. It was Luke who delivered the most revealing clue. "Dad!" Mary cried again today. Robert looked up from his phone. "Cried? Why?" Luke shrugged, focused on his building blocks. "I was drawing a family. You know those drawings with father, mother, and son holding hands?" Then she looked at it and started crying. Robert's heart tightened. "Then she hugged me really tight," Luke continued innocently. "She said I was a very special boy and that she... What else did she say, Luke?" The boy frowned, trying to remember. "She said she loved me more than I could imagine. She said she loved me more than I could imagine. Loved, not liked a lot, not thinks you're special. Loved, present indicative. Direct statement. What maid says that to her employer's son? That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking, connecting the dots. Mary had enormous gaps in her professional history. She cried when she saw family symbols. She treated Luke with a tenderness that went beyond professionalism, almost maternal. And that hidden elegance, that posture she tried to disguise but that escaped in moments of carelessness. Who was Mary Sullivan, really? The truth began to emerge at 3 in the morning on a Tuesday. Robert had spent hours digging through reverse image searches, using facial recognition tools, cross-referencing data. And then, buried in files from a charity gala 7 years ago, he found it. A photograph. Charity gala at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. Event for the elite of the American elite. And there, in the center of the image, wearing a dress that probably cost more than Robert's car, was her. Mary. But the name in the caption was different. Alessandra Montgomery. Robert clicked on the name. The results exploded on the screen. Heiress to the Montgomery Industries empire. Personal fortune estimated at $2 billion. CEO of multinational companies, philanthropist, philosophy graduate from the Sorbonne, MBA from Harvard Business School, and a detail that made Robert's blood run cold, mysteriously disappeared 6 years ago. Robert checked the dates with trembling hands. Alessandra Montgomery, disappeared in February 6 years ago. Mary Sullivan, hired as a maid in his house 5.5 years ago. 6 months apart, enough time to create a new identity, fake documents, invented professional history. But there was more. He clicked on old news about Alessandra. He went through dozens of articles about corporate mergers, philanthropic donations, women's leadership awards. And then he found the bombshell. Billionaire heiress Alessandra Montgomery appears pregnant at charity event. The photo showed a discreet belly, carefully hidden under a strategic dress. The press speculated about who the father would be, if she would marry, and how the pregnancy would affect the business empire. And then silence. No statement. No public appearance. The companies continued operating under the management of directors, but Alessandra Montgomery had evaporated from the face of the earth. Until she appeared at Robert's house, cleaning floors and teaching philosophy to Luke. Robert needed to sit down. The room started to spin. Alessandra, pregnant in February, disappears. Mary appears 6 months later. And Luke. He opened his son's birth certificate. August, 6 years ago. He did the math. If Alessandra was 3 months pregnant in February, the child would be born in August. The dates matched perfectly. No, it couldn't be. But the evidence was there, screaming, impossible to ignore. He looked out the window, saw Mary hanging clothes on the backyard clothesline. Delicate movement, careful. The same woman who commanded boardrooms with international CEOs was now pinning t-shirts with wooden clothespins. The same woman who had an estimated wealth in the billions now received minimum wage and a half to clean a stranger's house. Why? The answer was there, so obvious it hurt. She wasn't working there for money. She wasn't there out of financial need. A woman with that fortune could be anywhere in the world, living any life she wanted. But she chose to be there, in that house, close to Luke, her son. The shock was so violent that he had to hold onto the table. Luke wasn't his son by biology. He had adopted the boy as a baby, through an adoption agency that handled all the paperwork. A private adoption, quick, almost too easy. At the time, he thought he'd been lucky. A healthy child, no complications, perfect documentation. But what if it wasn't luck? What if it was a billionaire mother using all available resources to place her son in a safe home, and then get a job in that same home to stay close to him? What if all of this, from day one, was an elaborate plan by a desperate woman to not completely lose contact with the child she had been forced to abandon? His hands were shaking. He went back to the computer, searched for more information. He found old interviews with Alessandra Montgomery. The voice was the same. The gestures, even filtered through the screen, were identical. That way of tilting her head when thoughtful, that restrained smile when emotional. It was her. There was no more doubt. But the question consuming him now was different. Why would a woman at the height of power, expecting a child, simply abandon everything? What kind of desperate situation would force someone to disappear, give her own child up for adoption, and then infiltrate as a maid in the house where he was growing up? What terrible secret was Alessandra Montgomery hiding? He needed answers. He needed to look into her eyes and hear the truth. But at the same time, part of him was terrified. Terrified of what he would discover. Terrified that the truth would shatter the life Luke knew. Terrified of losing the son he loved, even if he wasn't biologically his. For a week, he watched Mary with new eyes. He saw how she touched Luke's toys when she thought no one was looking. He saw the tears she quickly wiped away when she saw family photos on the wall. He saw the pure, painful, impossible to disguise love that shone in her eyes every time Luke entered the room. And Mary noticed. Of course she noticed. She was too intelligent not to realize he was investigating. His glances had changed. His questions had become more direct. And that Thursday morning, when their eyes met in the kitchen, he saw the recognition there. She knew that he knew. The air grew thick between them. Luke was at school. The house was silent. This was the moment. They both felt it. He took a deep breath and finally said the words that would change everything. "Who are you, really?" Mary froze, the coffee cup trembling slightly in her hands. For a long moment she didn't answer. She just looked at him with those eyes that carried the weight of 6 years of secrets. Then, slowly, she placed the cup on the table. A tear rolled down her face. Then another. And another. "I'm his mother," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm Luke's mother." The silence that followed was brutal. Robert stood in the kitchen. Mary was methodically washing dishes. Luke sat drawing at the table, a seemingly mundane domestic scene. But now, everything had changed with Robert's newfound knowledge. He studied her intently, truly seeing her for the first time. The delicate hands scrubbing plates had once signed multi-million-dollar contracts. The soft voice humming quietly had once commanded boardrooms. The woman bent over the sink had single-handedly built an empire, and yet she had chosen to walk away from it all to wash his dishes. "Mary," he said, shattering the silence. She turned, a wet cup still in her grip. "Yes, Mr. Robert? We need to talk." Something in his measured tone made the cup quiver in her hand. Carefully, she set it in the sink and dried her hands on her apron, every movement deliberate. "Luke," Robert said evenly, "go play in your room." The boy complied instantly, sensing the electric tension crackling between the adults, though he couldn't comprehend its source. Once they were alone, Robert spoke 2 words that changed everything. "Alexandra Montgomery." Mary froze. All the blood disappeared from her face. For 3 seconds, she didn't breathe. Then she collapsed. Literally, her legs failed. She leaned against the sink, breathing rapidly, eyes wide. "How did you—" Her voice was a mere whisper, fragile as glass. "The how is irrelevant," Robert cut in sharply. "Only the why matters now." Mary closed her eyes, a lifetime of secrets swirling behind her lids. When they reopened, they held nothing but raw vulnerability. "Luke is my son." The words landed like stones, simple yet seismic. Robert felt the ground dissolve beneath him. Suspicion was a shadow. Confirmation was a thunderbolt. Why? The single word hung in the air, heavy with decades of unspoken questions. Mary took a deep breath. And then, for the first time in 6 years, she completely removed the mask. "7 years ago, I had everything," she began, her voice different now, firmer, more refined, without the humble accent she cultivated. "Companies, money, power. But I also had enemies. Many enemies." She stepped away from the sink, stood upright. Her posture changed. Her shoulders opened. The maid disappeared, and who remained in her place was the CEO. "When I got pregnant, I was involved in a billion-dollar legal dispute. The other party started making threats, subtle at first, then explicit. They said they would use my son against me, that they would kidnap him, that they would hurt him to force me to give up." Robert felt nauseous. "I had 2 options," Mary continued, tears streaming down her face. "Fight and risk my son's safety, or disappear and ensure he would be protected. I chose to disappear." "You gave him up for adoption," Robert said, processing. "Through discreet, untraceable channels," she confirmed. "I investigated you for 3 months before approving. I wanted to ensure Luke would be placed with good people." Robert remembered the adoption. Too quick, too easy. He and his wife had thought it was luck. It wasn't luck. It was a billionaire using unlimited resources to place her son in a safe home. "And then I faked my death," Mary said, her voice cracking. "I created forged documents, altered my appearance with carefully planned surgeries. I became Mary Sullivan. But why come back? Why work here?" The question hung in the air. Maria took a moment to answer. "Because I couldn't stay away," she whispered. "I spent 2 years trying. 2 years in a foreign country, rebuilding my life from nothing, forcing myself to pretend I didn't have a son growing up without me. And I was on the brink of losing my mind." She turned to Robert, eyes pleading. "I just wanted to see him grow up. That's all. I didn't need him to call me mother. I didn't need recognition. I just wanted to be close." "So you applied for the job," Robert said, connecting the dots. "With impeccable documents, false references that were impossible to verify. You never realized that I personally paid the agencies to recommend me." The audacity, the complexity of the plan, left Robert speechless. "Did your wife know?" Mary nodded, a new wave of tears. "She discovered the truth 6 months after I started working here. She noticed my watch, put the pieces together. One night, after you had fallen asleep, she confronted me." Robert vaguely remembered whispered conversations between his wife and Mary. Conversations that stopped when he entered the room. And she didn't send me away, Mary continued. She hugged me, cried with me, said she understood what it meant to be a mother, and that Luke was lucky to have two women who loved him so much. Robert felt as if he were seeing his wife for the first time too. That silent generosity, those moments when she insisted Mary stay for dinner, the times she forgot to deduct days Mary was absent. She protected me, Mary said. Protected us. And when she died, her voice broke completely. Robert remembered the funeral. Mary had cried more than anyone else. He thought it was just affection for her kind employer. It wasn't. It was a mother losing the ally who kept her secret, who allowed her to stay close to her son. I almost left after she died, Mary confessed. I feared you would discover the truth, that you would dismiss me, and I would lose Luke once more. But you were so consumed by grief, so intent on maintaining Luke's stability, that I remained unnoticed. You weren't invisible, Robert said, shame weighing in his voice. I chose not to see. Mary nodded slightly. She knew, and she was generous to me in ways you never noticed. Small gestures, small kindnesses. She allowed me to stay close to him. The businessman felt tears burning his eyes. His late wife had kept that secret, protecting everyone involved. And he, blinded by his own arrogance, had never questioned why Mary seemed so dedicated, so attentive, so maternal. I judged you, he confessed, his voice breaking. I treated you as invisible. I spoke badly of you behind your back. And all along you were... I was simply a mother desperate to stay close to her son, Mary said softly. The son couldn't take it anymore. With determined steps, he crossed the distance separating him from Mary and wrapped her in his arms. Mary, surprised, hesitated for a second before returning the embrace, holding her son as she had always dreamed of doing. You never stopped being my mother, he whispered against her shoulder. You were always here, Mary sobbed, years of restraint finally shattering. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for not being strong enough to stay with you. You were the strongest of all, the son replied, pulling back to look directly into her eyes. You sacrificed everything. Your identity, your right to be acknowledged, your personal happiness. That's not weakness, mother. That's the most profound love imaginable. The word mother echoed through the office like a blessing. The father watched the scene, his heart broken and remade at the same time. He had spent months belittling this woman, seeing her as inferior, as someone with no value beyond her domestic tasks. And now, before him, stood the personification of everything he preached to value. Sacrifice, dedication, unconditional love. Mary, he called, his voice still trembling. I have no words to ask for forgiveness. Mary looked at him, still in her son's arms. You don't need to ask forgiveness for not seeing what I hid. But I need to ask forgiveness for never trying to understand, the father insisted. For reducing your worth to the tasks you performed. For judging your character solely based on your social position. He paused, carefully choosing his words. My wife saw in you what I was too short-sighted to recognize. She understood that true nobility transcends money or status. And you embodied that truth every single day. Mary didn't respond immediately. She looked at Robert, carefully choosing her next words. Both turned at the same time. Luke was at the door, backpack still on his shoulders. He had come home early from school. Eyes wide, processing what he had just heard. You are my mother? The boy's voice was so soft, so tremulous, so laden with emotion that it shattered both adults' hearts. Mary couldn't speak. She could only nod, hands covering her mouth to muffle the sobs. Luke let his backpack fall, took 3 steps, stopped. You've always been here? Another nod. Why? Because, Mary managed to say through tears, because I love you more than anything in the world. And even though I couldn't be your real mother, I couldn't stay away. Luke processed this. 6 years of trying to understand the world, and now uncovering that the person closest to him had concealed the most profound secret of all. But instead of confusion or anger, something simpler emerged on his face. Recognition. I always knew you were special, he said. I always felt it. And then he crossed the distance and hugged Mary with all the strength a 6-year-old boy can muster. Mary held her son with the strength she had saved for 6 years. Robert watched, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice breaking. For all the years I treated you as invisible. For all the times I didn't see who you really were. Mary looked at him over Luke's head. You weren't supposed to see. That was the plan. But my wife saw. Your wife had a heart that could see beyond appearances. Heavy silence fell over the kitchen. Luke still clinging to Mary. Robert processing everything he had just discovered. What happens now? Mary asked, her voice small, vulnerable. The powerful CEO had vanished once more. What remained was simply a mother, trembling at the prospect of losing her son for the second time. Robert looked at Luke. The boy raised his head, eyes red but determined. She stays, Luke said with surprising firmness for a child. She's my mother. She stays. Robert felt something break and rebuild inside him. All the arrogance, all the judgment, all the blindness of recent years crumbling. She stays, he repeated, not as a maid, as family. The decision was made, but turning words into reality would require profound changes. In the days that followed, the house changed. Mary took off the uniform for the last time, Ate at the table with them, slept in the guest room instead of returning to the tiny apartment she rented. But the deepest transformation happened in Robert. He began to see people. Really see. The doorman. He greeted every day. He discovered the man had 3 children and dreamed of being a teacher. The coffee shop attendant. He noticed she was studying law at night while serving coffee during the day. The woman who cleaned the office. He noticed the literature degree ring she wore discreetly. How many stories had he ignored? How many extraordinary lives passed by him every day, invisible because he chose not to look? Mary had given him more than the truth about Luke. She had given him the most important lesson of his life, that dignity has nothing to do with position, that nobility doesn't show up in a bank account, and that the most extraordinary people are often those who serve in silence. 3 weeks later, on a Sunday morning, the 3 of them were in the garden. Luke was drawing. Mary was reading. Robert was watching. "You know you'll have to go back eventually," Robert said suddenly. Mary looked up from her book. "Go back?" "To your life. Your company's. Alexandra Montgomery can't stay dead forever." She was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I want to go back. That life almost cost me my son. That life also helped thousands of people," Robert pointed out. "The Montgomery companies employ how many? 50,000 people? 100,000? And you just abandoned all of that?" Mary had no answer. "Maybe," Robert continued carefully, "maybe you can have both. You don't have to choose between being a mother and being who you are. My wife didn't choose. She was a mother, and she was a doctor, and she was a wife, and she was a friend. People aren't one-dimensional." Luke looked up from his drawing. "You were rich?" Mary smiled. "I am rich. Like really rich? Like Billionaire." The boy's eyes widened. "And you gave up everything to be close to me?" "Yes." "Why?" The answer came out simple, direct. "Because money I can earn again. But you, my son, only exist once." Luke processed this with the strange wisdom that children sometimes have. "So you're not poor?" "No." "And you worked as a maid anyway?" "Yes, for me." "For you." The boy was quiet, then went back to his drawing. But now he was drawing 3 figures holding hands, and above them, he wrote in uneven letters, "My family." Robert felt a lump in his throat. "She's right, you know," he said to Mary. "You can go back. You don't have to hide anymore." Mary looked at the sky, processing the possibility. The enemies are still out there, but Luke isn't alone anymore. Now he has an entire family to protect him, and you have the resources to ensure security. Running away wasn't the only option. It was just the one you saw in that moment of desperation. For the first time in 6 years, Mary considered the possibility of reclaiming her identity. "It's going to be complicated," she said. "Everything worthwhile is complicated. People will talk. Let them talk. The story of a mother who sacrificed an empire for her son? That's not a scandal. That's heroism." Mary smiled, a real smile without masks, without disguises. "Maybe you're right." In an unassuming garden of a modest home in Connecticut, 3 individuals uncovered a profound truth. Family transcends blood, titles, or social status. It's defined by those who choose to stay day after day through difficulty, pain, and profound sacrifice. Mary had stayed. Robert had learned to see. And Luke had gained not just a mother, but a lesson about what truly matters in life. When was the last time you truly looked at the people around you? The housekeeper meticulously cleaning your home might carry a story capable of shattering your understanding. The doorman greeting you daily could have been a hero in a previous chapter of life. The person you routinely overlook might be precisely the one you're meant to truly see. Because the extraordinary rarely announces its arrival. It hides in simple uniforms, in discreet smiles, in silent sacrifices that no one witnesses. And sometimes, the greatest fortunes in the world, those that cannot be deposited in banks, are being built right in front of you, waiting to be noticed. Mary and Luke's journey teaches us that dignity knows no monetary value, that true nobility transcends financial status, and that genuine love is measured in unseen sacrifices, waiting silently until the moment truth emerges and fundamentally transforms everything. If this story touched your heart, leave in the comments. Have you ever judged someone by their appearance and later discovered you were completely wrong? Share your experience. Your words might open someone's eyes today.